Madam Clerk.
Every time I go. So we well, you know, I don't think I've ever met her. Really? No. Yeah, I think it's against it.
Yeah.
Really was. And the open house.
Oh, it's fine. That says
You guys were all set. I don't know. We assumed everything was out. I'm pretty sure. Why don't we just go to
Final board, you know,
if they got everything
trigger for the top board on accessory 600 square feet.
Yeah.
And you can't be more than a certain, so you still got-
There were three things I wanted to. Haunted was. The open house, how the plumbing was sort of turned off upstairs. You know, when you turn the plumbing back on, it's been a leak. Well, it's been a leak. So you yeah.
the slope road from that far north.
Yeah.
For the North Pole.
And then,
Or the roads.
What? There was a lot more agreement there. It was like pouring. And really, really windy.
Was it?
Yeah.
They're all over the place.
I gotta look around.
Well, you could leave them here and move out.
I don't know if
You could move out and move south and leave here. That's what Mike did. I started getting a message. And you couldn't hear the set it up.
No, I get the call. What are you doing? So it's like a huge gap.
You would be asking.
It's a real call. Right? I know, right?
It's funny, I got to see a problem with my late eighties two parents.
They call you late.
My two parents and then well, not my mother. My mother.
But. No one doesn't love it. So I guess.
No, well, people are so.
So quick that.
This is the person behind the tape.
No, we don't. Yep.
But they thought for sure.
Long time no see.
We've got three. This gentleman's here, but so he might read this, but we have two others to be read into record.
About what?
The public hearing. Yeah, these are a public hearing. This one is not. I did not put that on.
Okay. How did your event go? I haven't seen you.
It was good. It was good. It was we laughed.
No, that's what you're supposed to do at a roast.
You had a busy night that night too, 'cause you were at the governor's. That was nuts.
Something
It was a
going.
celebration, wasn't it?
I don't know. I think I ended up having to work, so I don't think I was at the Capitol
So it was that
celebration.
Capitol celebration. You had to work that night?
I didn't go to either of them.
Well, we're thinking about doing something in the summertime outside.
Okay.
For our 10th anniversary, you know, on the lake with music and tent. You know,
All right,
something-
call me.
I
Call
will,
me.
I will.
Yeah.
We just
So
talked
what
about
did the boat go for? Do you know? She sent me a letter for like 315 or 350. So would have that been the?
Well, yeah, I
What it
don't
went for?
remember because I wasn't in charge of that. Put me on the spot.
No.
Yeah, I don't. But, and, yeah.
But I haven't heard
So,
who it
I-
was.
I can't, she was supposed to do that. So my tamale dinner, because we're all gonna do two people, 1,200. Wow. I know, so they haven't called us yet.
Just two people coming to dinner?
No, so two couples. So we said,
You divided
we did it. No, we did it twice.
Okay.
So we got $2,500 for this tamale making experience. So I said, well,
Okay.
we're,
You have to really. No, if we only got 350 for the boat, we got to work on that because we should be able to
Yeah,
get more than
well,
that. What about- I don't know what you got for D'Angelo.
about the same.
Yeah,
I think it was about the same, yeah.
we got to get that up somehow. Make it more enticing or something.
What, this is what happened. And this was the outside group that was, you know, people, before the live auction started, they started putting out, and before the program, they started putting out who won the asylum, which it was just after, like, or during the program.
Okay.
So people were standing up.
Okay, that doesn't help.
And I'm like,
You gotta have
Right.
alcohol too.
oh, I know, it was, I mean, but the person, yeah, there's no opportunities for improvement.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't be at the end all. And,
No.
And my development person.
Yeah, we're elected temporary chairman of both for him. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the town of Waukesha on January 11th, 2018 at about 6:04 p.m. Calling to order the joint public hearings, plural, and plan commission meeting. Understand that Chairman Merrick is be arriving in a bit, but we're going to begin the meeting anyway. The procedure That is provided for after we do the Pledge of Allegiance here. We'll have a roll call, then we'll have a quick temporary election of a chairperson until he arrives. So if you would join me, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Clerk Nicholas, would you call the roll, please?
Supervisor Fisher.
Here.
Supervisor Durr.
Here.
Supervisor Wolf.
Here.
Supervisor Radke.
Here.
Commissioner Miller.
Here.
Commissioner Ramirez. Commissioner White.
Here.
Commissioner Flanagan. Commissioner Stigler.
Here.
Okay, thank you. We'll do the quick open meetings law and compliance check. Clerk Nicholas, can you confirm that we have complied with all of the necessary statutes and ordinance with regards to the posting of this meeting and the open meeting law?
Yes, we have.
Okay, thank you. All right, then our procedure provides that the person who is longest serving member of the body calls a temporary election for temporary chairman. Do we have anyone who would like to volunteer tonight? Don't all jump at once. Mr. Miller?
Well, thank you.
You would decline.
I'll make a motion that Supervisor Fisher be the temporary chairman until the permanent chairman arrives.
I'll second it. I thought you wanted me to be the chair.
I did.
Yeah.
That was correct. Okay, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And I will abstain, please, Madam Clerk. Okay, the first public hearing or public hearing number one, notice is hereby given that a joint public hearing involving the Town of Waukesha Plan Commission and the Waukesha Town Board will be held on Thursday, January 11th, 2018, beginning at 6 p.m. at the Waukesha Town Hall, located at W250S 3567 Center Road, Waukesha, Wisconsin, to hear proposed rezone request for the petitioner Clint Albert. The location is S29 W27340 Green Lane, Waukesha, Wisconsin. The tax key number is WAKT1324990. Specifically, this public hearing is to consider the request to rezone the property from R1 and C1 to B3 and C1. All interested parties will be given an opportunity to be heard. So the public hearing is now open. Are you going to make a couple of orientation comments for us, Planner?
Yeah,
Malarkey?
I could quickly go through the staff review so that people have an understanding what the project is and
Please.
then open up for comment. Sure. So the petitioner is asking for a rezone on his property from R1 to B3 general business to operate a landscape and snow service company. The petitioner currently lives on the property and stores his business equipment off-site. He's also requested conceptual review of a site plan of operation, which is addressed under a separate staff review and a separate item on the agenda. He's also currently in the process of having the environmental corridor and wetlands delineated on the site, and also preparing a more detailed site plan and architectural drawing. So we're going to need to ultimately see where the environmental corridor and the wetlands fall to fully evaluate the site plan. So that would be conceptual only. The petitioner is also currently in violation of town ordinances due to 2 temporary accessory structures on the site. So in addition to moving his business to the site, he wants to move his landscape and snow service company business to the site. The rezone and his site plan of operation would bring the property in compliance with town ordinances. In July 2017, the petitioner also received approval for a 30-foot by 32-foot accessory structure on the property as well. So my comments are basically as follows. The town's comprehensive plan for this property has the area designated and planned for commercial use. He's currently zoned R1, but it's planned for commercial. So that basically means as development proposals come forward, you want to make sure that they comply with what the comprehensive plan shows. And the town's is commercially planned, including the properties next door, which happen to be residential, but are also planned for commercial use. Waukesha County, though, has the property designated as low-density residential and environmental corridor. So that would need to be amended as part of this process to commercial as well. The application deadline for comprehensive plan amendments is Monday, the 15th, although the application itself is not very complicated. In terms of zoning, as I mentioned, it's zoned R1 and it's got some environmental corridor overlay and conservancy overlay for the wetland. The properties directly east are already zoned B3 business use, although they are used for residential purposes. They already have the B3 designated zoning on them. This would be consistent with that. In addition, Waukesha Storage is located directly north of the petitioner's property. B3 zoning allows, through the inclusion of B2 and B1 permitted uses, it allows residential uses as accessory uses to the principal business use as a permitted use. If the residential use isn't found to be accessory to the business use, so let's say the residential use is the primary use of the property, and business is a equally primary use of the property, the residential use would be a legal non-conforming use within the zoning district, similar to the residences to the east of the property that are legal non-conforming uses because they're zoned B3. What this means, though, is that as legal non-conforming uses, that's okay, but you can't expand other uses on the property without bringing that into compliance first. And one way to make that compliant is to request a conditional use for the residential use to make that a conforming use in the property. So that's one thing that would happen if the Plan Commission and Board should decide that the residential use is not accessory to the business use, and in fact is a principal use with the business use. He'd have to also come back with a conditional use request to further improve the property beyond the residential use that's already there. As I mentioned, the petitioner is currently in the process of delineating the environmental corridor in the wetland, and that the boundaries of the C1 and the EC overlay districts would then follow what the delineated wetland environmental corridors would be when that happens. So I have outlined, if the Plan Commission should choose, we can get into these conditions after. There are 5 conditions here. We'll address that at the agenda item later on. I think that does it for the background of the rezone request for this site.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Albert, would you identify yourself, please, for us? You just identify, you need not say anything
Glenn
at this point in time, but very good. Thank you.
Yep.
We will, that's fine, you can sit for the moment. We will proceed with a couple just real quick ground rules. This is a public hearing. We're here to hear public comment. If you'd like to speak, approach the microphone. Give us your name and address for the town clerk, please. This is not a debate or a question and answer session. Direct your comments, please, to the town board. We'll be a little bit loose on it. Typically, we'll ask for those who would be in favor to speak, then those would be opposed. You'll have an opportunity to speak more than once if you so choose, but we'll give everybody a courtesy to talk at least one time. So anyone who would like to speak in favor of the proposed rezoning, please come forward.
If I may, although the town has put together the staff report, the petitioner should be given an opportunity to present his petition.
Okay, so at this point in time, if you'd like to say something further, thank you. Mr. Albert, if you would like to say something further, go ahead.
I mean, I think everything was pretty much addressed from planner.
Okay. If you want to talk a bit later, we'll give you an opportunity, but come forward, sir. Please give us your name and address.
Not in favor, but I have a statement.
Okay, well, we'll give you the opportunity. Anybody who would like to speak in favor of the request at this point in time, please come forward. No one? Okay, then come forward, sir.
Yeah, my name's Bob Hartman. I live on Sunset Drive, Waukesha, Wisconsin. But I own the adjacent.
Would you give your full address, please? for
South
us?
30, West 27210, Sunset Drive.
Thank you, and just please make sure you speak into the microphone so everybody can hear. Thank you.
Okay, I own the 12 acres adjoining Albert's property. And my concern is I drafted an instrument up here, in reference to the Park and Planning Commission, Town Chairman, Army Corps of Engineers, and the DNR hearing the rezoning of South 30, West 27, 340 Green Lane from R1 and C1 to B3 and C1. My property has been in the Hartman family for 89 years, so I'm a longtime resident. Now I have concerns of runoff damage due to the adjacent 12 acres that I own. Tax key 1324-994-009. If this property is rezoned to business, the other owners of property adjacent to mine, Waukesha Storage LLC and Black Oak Ridge Subdivision, were required to install retention ponds. And Oak Ridge did a really good job. They got 3 of them, I think. And so does Waukesha Storage. And the reason that is when you get excess rain, we can get a lot of rain here quick. And also you got contaminants, from people coming in with trucks, trailers, or whatever, salt. So you have this potential for damage, and all this water runs down through my property and into Pebble Creek. And that's why the Army Corps of Engineers should be involved. Okay. Also, my concern is for the Chicago and Northwest Railroad Company. And I gave Kathy a copy of some pictures I took on January 8th, and they have a 29-inch ID culvert there, and it's only 20-inch available. At this point in time, it's all frozen, and that can happen. Just like we have now, and then we have rain, and we can have a lot of rain, and then you're going to be on the railroad. And I've seen the trains in past years when I was a kid, wash out and roll over. And we had free coal for about 2 years because they dumped coal cars, and they wouldn't pick it up. So the farmers were entitled to go gather it and pick it up. So, it can happen, That's what I'm trying to get, I guess, the point across. So, let's see. So these railroads railroad was built like in the 1800s, probably 1830, 1840, and not designed to carry the additional runoff, as this area was mostly woods and farm at the time. Now, this property can be upgraded to B3 or C1, but it should be done in a correct manner, not just a fly-by-night. Here, I'm going to do this, and this is what it is. No, you got to do a lot of research on this because there's other people concerned. And also the property owners in the neighborhood should be, they're all going to have a statement maybe. But that's my concern as the senior person in the area, the one that owns the most land. So, any more questions or from you people? No? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments. Who else would like to speak? Please come forward. And state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is James Kowalski. I live at South 29 West 27326 Green Lane. I own the property immediately east of the Alberts Contracting LLC property. I've been there for 30 years. I am opposed to the rezoning of it. The reason for that is when the master plan came through, or the one that I'm aware of in 1978, they made the cutoff there. And I think the consideration was you had a real nice house there, residential, and the adjacent property in the C1 and everything was very delicate. And I think that with this in mind, that was why it was done. The basic premise still exists today, that it is a sensitive area, and what was applicable then is still applicable now. I am also opposed to granting it any kind of conditional use permit. The majority of the surrounding properties, land usage is residential. and agricultural or conservative, with the exception of the storage area. If B3 zoning is granted to this area, what safeguards are in place to prevent the occupant from future expansion into the C1 or the environmental corridor areas? The present limited liability corporation, the occupant, has demonstrated its ability to circumvent zoning restrictions, the road right-of-way, building codes, and property lines. If rezoned, I believe it would also set a precedent for properties at South 30 West 27548 Green Lane and South 26 West 27170 MacArthur Road, where non-conforming land usage exists. And Mr. Albert has been there, I believe, 3 years in July or August coming up. And since he moved in, the equipment has been stored there. So with that in mind, I thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kowalski. I note that Chairman Merrick has arrived at 6:19. Would you like to come up and take over the reins, please? We'd be glad to have you. We are, just even for your purposes, we are in the middle of the first hearing on the rezoning request from Clint Albert, and we're in the middle of taking comments from the audience. Welcome and take over.
Thank you. My apologies for my tardiness.
We're looking to see if anyone else in the public wishes to speak on this matter, Mr. Chairman.
Hello, my name is Samuel Fuller. I live at South 30 West 27466 Green Lane, Waukesha, Wisconsin. I've been a resident since 2011. I'm the resident that's exactly to the west of the Albert's contracting or Albert's property. I have a few issues with the residential and business rezone. The first would be the noise issue that currently exists. The current landscape business operation operates on the side of the property that's closest to my residence, and there's an unusual amount of noise that happens within the last hour of daylight, including trucks, mowers, blowers, weed eaters, and in general employee conversation. The site is visually unattractive to me. The property has become extensively populated by debris piles, including firewood, logs, branch piles, mulch, various implements, small canvas outbuildings, barrels, pallets, trucks, trailers, etc. I have a background in natural resources. I've been an arborist for the city of Waukesha for the last 9 years. I'm a graduate of UW Stevens Point in 2005. I have knowledge of certain parameters that need to be in place when you're yarding wood material, mulch, logs, brush piles. That's not in place at this current time, and I have no reason to believe it will be put in place. I'd like to get on to my main issue, which is the environmental impact and the water issue. As Mr. Hartman said earlier, there's a waterway, there's a spring that comes across Mr. Albert's property and then crosses my property, and there's a pond on my property, and then it flows off onto Mr. Hartman's property. I only own about 1.25 acres, and as it currently stands, about that back third of my property has began to become underwater in the summer months. In 2016, an additional gravel driveway roundabout was installed on the property that's in between. It doesn't show on that picture, but it's between the house and my property, which is to the west. Yes, in that area there. The task was completed by removing, in my estimate, maybe 50 to 100 mature oaks, walnuts, hickories, and other tree species, and the associated forest soil, understory, leaf litter, all of these things that would naturally take in water, hold it on that property for a longer period of time, stop the flow. Since the driveway that the business uses to store its vehicle and equipment was completed, I began to notice more water traveling and staying on my property during even minute rain events. This issue became worse in 2017 with basically the entire spring, summer, and fall being unusually wet on my property. The wetness is impacting my ability to mow and maintain the back third of my 1.5 acre property. Additional mature trees have been recently removed, causing my greater concern for an even wetter 2018. Contaminants like pesticides, herbicides, gas, oil, and salt are also concerns of mine, as I see no barrier between the new driveway and the spring that flows across his property. I additionally experienced a considerable algae bloom in my pond in 2017, which I can only attribute to fertilizers being used uphill for me. That's all I have to say at this time, but I just would like to impress upon you that his use currently and the changes and modifications that have already taken place are impacting my property. I'm using the use of my property, and I'm afraid I actually have two outbuildings that are in that back portion of my building. I'm afraid I'm going to lose the use of them because the ground's just going to become too saturated with the loss of trees and the increased flow downhill. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got the pictures of this. You'd like to see them?
Come on up to the microphone.
I was up here once already.
It's best if you somehow explain them, and then we'll pass them around. I'll help you. If you want to go to the microphone, to start with picture number 1, please.
It's a picture. If you're not very good, I'm not a photographer. That's the driveway. There's a picture of the garage that was put up this fall and has plastic house wrap only on it. Siding hasn't been installed. Here's a good picture of the house, beautiful residence. There's a picture of evergreens and
Bless you.
here's a picture of the driveway and the truck.
These are the pictures of the petitioner's property, sir?
Yes, sir. Oh, there's one of mine. There's a picture of a trailer through the brush. It's hard to see. Here's the same picture. This one through the same. Here's a picture of the evergreen planted in right away. As well as a Parker monument statue. Here's a picture of the driveway in the front.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to speak?
Yeah, I got a picture too. I took on.
Come on up to the microphone, sir. Thank you.
I got a picture I took on.
And your name and address for the clerk, please.
I already gave my name and
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just a supplemental. I forgot that, I don't know, we were collecting pictures, but I did this in my own curiosity. On January 8th, I went down to this culvert that's 29-inch ID culvert that's underneath the railroad track. And just for reference, it could be washed out, given our condition in Wisconsin and with all the building that's in the area. And that's why I was interested in if you or the Corps of Engineers or the DNR are willing to do a retention pond like my other neighbors in the area. So I'll pass this along.
We passed that one around, sir. Kathy had a copy and we passed it while you were talking. Chairman, if there's no one else who wishes to speak at this time, we have two letters to read into the record. One from Deanna and Brian Schermacher of South 29 West 27267 Green Lane, Waukesha, Wisconsin 53188, January 11, 2018. To whom it may concern, we are writing to express our concerns regarding changing the zoning in our neighborhood to allow for a snow plowing and landscaping business. We are against any new zoning which would allow this to happen. We enjoy living in a quiet neighborhood, rural area with limited traffic and beautiful curb appeal. We have multiple concerns as related to any new zoning that would allow a business to operate in this quiet community. One, we're concerned with the decrease in property value if a business is operating in this residential area. We do not want to see and hear trucks entering and exiting the property all times of day and night, increasing noise, lights, and general disturbances. We do not want increased traffic from people entering and exiting this property for business all times of day and night, parentheses, which is often the case with snow plowing in the winter months, close parentheses, period. Number two, new zoning will reduce curb appeal. This is a beautiful, quiet, rural community. The owner has already removed trees and built a large metal storage building, which detracts from the natural beauty of the neighborhood. Now he was to have trucks and equipment stored on or around the property, which will only continue to decrease the curb appeal of the neighborhood. Though this area has been used for business in the past, it is now a thriving and diverse residential community. If you allow businesses to start populating the neighborhood, you drive out the elderly and families. We do not want to risk lowering property values and quality of life for snow plowing and landscaping service that can be put in a non-residential or business-friendly area. Signed, Brian Schermacher. Second letter is dated July 11, 2018. Dear members of the Town of Waukesha Plan Commission and the Waukesha Town Board, we do not support allowing S29 West 27340 Green Lane to be rezoned from R1 and C1 to B3 and C1. The homeowner of the property has already cut down and removed at least 100 mature trees, stripped the topsoil, created berms, and put in a gravel circular driveway near the area being zoned part of the Conservancy District. He's parking an average of 2 business vehicles, parentheses, which are not DOT inspected due to weight class and could potentially be leaking oil into the Conservancy property, close parentheses, and 3 trailers on this circular driveway, and has employees parking their vehicles in this area as well. We can see he has constructed at least 3 temporary outbuildings, one of which has had rock salt stored in it, which can be washing into the Conservancy property. He has already constructed a separate 3-car garage on his residential property. If this property is to change, what more would he want to build and how much more equipment would he be storing on these properties? I own a business of a similar nature and lease a building and property in a business district where it belongs because it can be a 24/7 operation. My property in this neighborhood is my home and has been since 1991, and before that owned by my father since he built it in the 70s. My residence is where I come to relax, spend time with my wife and kids, and escape my work. I don't want to see and hear the activity of the business at all hours across from my home, which is my sanctuary. This change would also bring down our property values, which would make our residential property hard to sell across from a growing business district. We'd like you to keep the property zoned residential so we can keep our home and other properties along the street and our family for years to come. Signed, Robert and Charlotte Hartman, South 30 West 27431 Green Lane, Waukesha, Wisconsin 53188.
Thank you. Anybody else that chooses to speak on this issue?
Yeah, first off, I'd like to address Sam, as he had said about the water overflow with his building, and Sam is the neighbor to the west of me that
Okay,
owns
but
approximately
you need to direct your
an
comments
acre.
directly to the board.
Okay, that land was wetland for 30 years. When them buildings were built, that land was wetland. And my second issue is there is a natural pond that runs through my yard. It's been bone dry the last 2 years, and there's water in it right now, and it's coming from across the street, which I'm pretty confused at why it's this high. And I guess my third issue would be everybody says there's no business in the neighborhood. There's the mud jackers that are 2 buildings down from me that operate over 100 trucks in and out of their building. To the west of them is a cake business that has activity come and go daily. And then next to me is Kalowski, who refurbishes canoes and does all kind of farming equipment. I mean, I didn't bring any pictures, but he's got tractors and all kinds of stuff on the side of his house. I've actually had to put a fence up because I don't want to look at his outdoor storage equipment anymore. So it's not like a residential neighborhood. Everything to the east is all business, including the church. Straight down from me, everything. And if you look at the map, it was projected to be a business. I'm not affecting the corridor. I did not cut down 100 trees. I cut down maybe 30 trees in a trajectory to run my business. And that was what I had planned. And now I'm bringing it about. And the trees were not mature oaks. They were buckthorn, crabapple trees that were no good and rotted. As for the water flow, that did not affect any of the water flow whatsoever. There's definitely no way that affected any water.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else? Before we close the public hearing? Do we have any questions from the Plan Commission or the board?
Residents have asked and answered or addressed.
I didn't get any questions.
Okay.
It's a good question. But I didn't.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Thank you. Going once, going twice, and we'll close public hearing number 1 and on to hearing number 2. Notice is hereby given that the joint public hearing involving the Town of Waukesha Plan Commission and the Town of Waukesha Board will be held on Thursday, January 11, 2018, following the joint public hearing number 1 beginning at 6 p.m. at the Waukesha Town Hall located at West 250 South 3567 Center Road, Waukesha, Wisconsin, to hear the proposed zoning text change for section 13-2-15 sub H. All interested parties will be heard and given an opportunity to speak.
The chairman, at the last one, we had the staff give their report first. Is that what you'd like to do?
Yes, please.
Okay, this was heard by the Plan Commission and Board at last month's meeting and given approval to go ahead for public hearing this month. What's being petitioned by the town, by the board at this time is a change to section 13-2-15, sign illumination and nuisance prevention. Previously, the Waukesha zoning code did not allow internally illuminated signs if they faced a land that was used for residential, for single family or residential, single family or duplex residential use, or zoned for single family and duplex residential use. The proposed language would allow the town board, after consideration of a few factors, to be able to approve these signs on a case-by-case basis. And the factors to be considered would include the distance between the proposed sign and existing or potential future single-family or duplex residential uses, any screening or buffers between the proposed sign and existing or potential future single-family or duplex residential uses, the size of the proposed sign, and whether the adjacent properties are currently used for single-family or duplex residential. So this allows flexibility on a case-by-case basis to evaluate these particular signs if they are internally illuminated. And those are the language changes.
Thank you. Anybody in the audience wish to speak on this matter? Any questions from the board or plan commission for the planner?
I've got just one question I mentioned before, and I guess I'd ask Planner Malarkey to go through this in your words, and I know we looked at this a bit before, but D, that says whether the adjacent properties are currently used for single family or duplex residential. The intent of that is even if it might be zoned for that purpose or whatever, it's not currently used, that the town could use that as a consideration to basically approve an internally illuminated sign to face that property? Is that in essence what that says? Or tell me what that really says and what's intended to accomplish.
Yeah, I think that's one of the ways that could be interpreted and used. There's later on tonight on the town board agenda, there's a sign request where the sign is facing a property that's used for agricultural purposes, but happens to be zone R1 for whatever reason. So this would allow the town board to take a look at that property and say, there's a house in the property, it's set back hundreds of feet, it's used for a farm. Who knows at what point this would be used for residential use? This would allow the board to say, hey, a small sign facing this particular property is okay because that property is not actually used for residential purpose at this time. And if it is in the future, the sign would already exist and accommodations for buffering and so on could be made at that point in time.
And if I may, Mr. Fisher, add to that answer, I agree with what was stated. I'm in part one who recommended that D be part of this, because if you look at the original ordinance, it said signs which are internally illuminated shall not face adjacent lands which are zoned for or used as single family or duplex use. Because I felt it was significant for the original drafters of this to include both zone for and used, I felt it important to say that that should be part of the considerations when you look at it. Now, I happen to have the opposite example because I look to a property that's a residential, possibly rental, in the middle of a commercial district. Everybody else is commercial. It's the last residential. It's going to convert to commercial at some point. Why should everybody else not be able to put up their signs because that one house is left and used only? And so that I look at the opposite, where the house is there, but it's not what the planned use, it's not what the master plan says. It's a legal non-conforming use. It has the right to be there, but everybody knows that at some point that property should be. So all I ask for is that it be a consideration. None of the considerations are binding. They're all just factors that could be taken into consideration. So I give that as an explanation.
And I appreciate your explanation. And I think that's part of maybe a little bit of the confusion as to what the intent is, but I think probably I can support this. I think it's probably to be that way. I mean, certainly that allows the discretion. If this were to pass as a change of the ordinance, it allows some discretion to look at that from different perspectives. So in that regard, I think it's probably appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? I think we can close public hearing number 2 and on to the Plan Commission. Number 6, discussion and possible action on accessory structure. Petitioner is Jeffrey Arndt. Location is South 52, West 25-100 Sage Court. And it would be appropriate at this time for board members to leave, sorry. And this is for a recommendation to the town board. Planner Malarkey, take it away.
Thank you. The petitioner is requesting to construct an accessory building on the property that's 7 foot by 14 feet in dimension, 98 square feet. The application was originally submitted to be 8 foot by 14 foot, but that has since been amended by the petitioner through an addendum. So it is 7 foot by 14 feet with a height of 9 foot 6 inches as measured from grade to peak. The petitioner states that the colors and siding will be the same as the residence, and the accessory building will be used for the storage of personal property. The reason it's before the Plan Commission today is because they have a written request for a waiver or modification for the location of the building per section 13-2-10E7, which requires review and approval by the Plan Commission and board. The accessory building is in compliance with the ordinance in every respect except for the location. Typically, accessory buildings need to be set back a minimum of 10 feet from the principal residence. In this case, the property owner is requesting that the building be set back only 2.5 feet from the principal residence as measured from the roof eave. And what they're proposing for fire safety reasons and according to direction by the building inspector to add 5/8 inch drywall to the interior of the shed facing the house. The shed would also be constructed on a wood foundation set on concrete blocks instead of a permanent foundation. And the petitioner states the reason for the accessory building location to be where it's at is due to a couple of things. One, if you take a look at the aerial photograph and the topography on the site, it's very hilly, and there's only a few places where the accessory building could reasonably be located, and that might be on the side of the building, the northeast side of the building here, or at the northern portion of the building here, which is at the bottom of the hill. The reason why the petitioner stated that they didn't want to put it offset 10 feet from the building in this location was because it would use up most of his usable flat yard to the side of the house and the building entrance here on the side. And the reason they didn't want to locate it at the far north corner of the house is because they use this as a sledding hill and would basically be the terminus of the sledding hill and being in the way of that. So what they're requesting it be put just adjacent to the house there, and I can pull up a different view. Somewhere. Oh, here it is. So this is oriented incorrectly. This is the northeast face of the house. And you can see the accessory building is just off adjacent to the house, 2.5 feet off of it. The petitioners also provided some photographs of the existing house. This is looking toward the house. The accessory building would be located where that the pine tree is adjacent to the house there, just at the bottom of the hill. There's also a retaining wall up here. Here's a straight on look of where the location would be in the mulched area. This is looking downward, the sledding hill toward the point of the property at the north end. And then this is looking back upward toward the house at the bottom of the sledding hill. So since the petitioner is requesting a waiver or modification, the Town Plan Commission needs to make a determination. It includes the A through F as outlined under number 1 in my staff report. As I mentioned, the accessory building meets all the other provisions of the ordinance, and in my mind is compatible in terms of materials with the house itself. So I have provided, if the Town Plan Commission and Board should choose approval, a list of 8 conditions, including the 5/8 inch drywall and the limit on the size of the building itself.
Thank you. And is the petitioner here this evening?
Yes.
Good evening.
The other half of it.
Do we have any questions for the petitioner and or the planner?
I do. I'm just curious, what do you plan to do with the 2 feet between two structures?
Come on up to the microphone to answer, please.
What do we plan to do with the 2 feet? Leave it as it is. It's just landscaping right now with wood chips in it.
Okay, I guess I'm curious, why wouldn't you just come off of the shed roof or something off the back of the house?
Because it's a 2-story. It's an exposed basement there. Can you go back to that picture? You can't. The roof line is, what, 12 feet above where the shed's going to be.
No, I understand that. I'm just,
So the structure would be located just not on the window, just to the
Just
side of the window.
behind the bush.
Yep, just behind the bush right there in the mulched area with 2.5 feet behind it.
That's really the only flat space we have.
no, I
That's it.
understand that. I can understand why you're putting it there and everything. It just seems to me that it would be architecturally more acceptable if you came off the side of the building with a shed roof or any kind to match the look of the house.
You mean attach it to the siding?
Oh, well, yeah, you bring it out.
We don't want to
make
do
it
that
part of
because
the
we don't want it to be permanent. We want to be able to move it. When our kids, this is all stuff for the kids.
Okay,
When the kids are gone, you can get rid of the shed. That's why it's not permanent.
okay. I'm just raising the question.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else? Questions?
I mean, I guess I'll just make a comment. I've got I guess, agree with Commissioner Flanagan. I understand what you're saying, but I mean, I look up at the ceiling here. I mean, those ceiling tile are 24 inches wide. We're talking about 2¼ ceiling tile. I mean, this is going to have a little bit of a, as I read it, a roof overhang. I know it's not a very big thing, but a gable roof. It's going to dump water then between the house and this little structure. I mean, I don't think that makes a lot of sense to me. I agree with Mr. Flanagan. I think you'd be better off at that to attach the house. I mean, you're going to have to get a skinny person in there alongside it to even build it. I just don't understand it.
I'm curious, you're going to destroy this later on or something? I don't quite understand. What?
No, not destroy it, but we don't want to add on to the house or change the integrity of the home. First of all, it's behind a hill. Nobody can see this shed. Nobody can see it from just about, I think our neighbors next door to us can, but nobody else can see the shed from anywhere. You can't see it driving into the, you cannot see it. And we don't want to, I mean, start adding on to the house. Now you got to tear off siding. Now you got to go through construction up against the house. We just want a simple, cheap, inexpensive shed.
It's going to match the house, correct?
Well, of course it has to.
Framed and it's going to be.
Well, it has to be in our subdivision, yes.
I understand. Yeah.
But no, if it's not really pretty, nobody wants a shed on their property. We just don't have room to put the toys.
I don't disagree with Supervisor Fisher or Commissioner Flanagan with regards to its placement, the difficulty of construction, the proximity to the house, the water running to the house, perhaps damaging your foundation. However, it's your house, and if that's what you so choose to do, I'm a property rights advocate, and I don't take necessarily issue with it because, again, it's your house, it's your property. And if the Plan Commission board so see fit to grant the variance, I don't take issue with it.
Are you looking for a motion?
I would be looking for a motion.
I motion we approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. On to, and that will be come up before the board after the Plan Commission meeting. To be accessory structure for Bruce Rolfe. Location is W243. Yeah, ma'am. It's still coming back before the board after the Plan Commission. Okay, thank you. Location West 243 South 6150 Elder Drive, tax key is WAKT 1432009. This is for a recommendation to the town board. Planner Malarkey, take it away. Twice in a row. Yes.
Okay, thank you. The petitioner is requesting to construct a 32-foot by 35-foot, which is 1,120 square feet addition to his existing 1,150 square foot garage. The garage will be, with addition, will be used for storage and service of personal vintage automobiles. The addition remodel will include raising the roof on the existing garage structure to an overall height of 18 foot 6 inches and installation of a vehicle hoist. The proposed roofing, horizontal LP smart side, and garage doors will match the existing residence. This accessory building in total is over 600 square feet and needs review and approval by the Town Plan Commission and the Town Board. Since the original application that was submitted by the petitioner showed the existing the existing accessory structure as 16.5 feet. In the construction drawings, they've submitted an addendum that shows the entire thing, the existing and the proposed addition being raised to 18 foot 6 inches. The petitioner is in compliance with all provisions of the zoning ordinance. The height requirements would be basically 6 inches above what's allowed under the zoning ordinance, but Section 13-2-11C of the ordinance requires, allows height regulations to be increased. So every 1 foot of increase in height would require an additional 2 feet of offset. In this case, they're going an additional 6 inches, which would require an additional 1 foot of offset. They're showing a setback of the structure of 33 feet from the south lot line, which is more than enough to accommodate the increase in height. I have some photographs that show the existing home. You can see the existing home on the west here. Here's the existing garage back in the distance. The addition would come off the back of the garage. This would be raised up another 1.5 feet, and the materials would all be the same types of materials as the existing garage and the existing house as well. This is just another angle. You can see the accessory structure that exists now. The garage doors are reconfigured in the new elevations as well. So I have prepared if the Plan Commission agrees, recommendation for approval to the town board with 8 conditions associated with the approval.
Thank you. And is the petitioner here this evening? Good evening. Questions for the petitioner and or the planner? Okay, no questions? How about a motion?
I make a motion we approve, subject to all the conditions.
For recommendation to the town board.
May I ask just one question, Mr. Chairman?
Please do.
Can you describe a little bit more the vehicle hoist? What is that to be and how much height do you have in the garage?
Excuse me, the existing garage is at 15 feet, which is not high enough for a hoist where he wants to locate it. And so raising the roof, he wants it in the existing garage because of the driveway, so he can pull straight in to use it. The hoist is only for maintenance of the vehicles that we have. It's just for personal use. He's having a hard time getting around on his creeper to fix the cars, that's all.
Okay, so how much height inside of the garage then for this vehicle hoist?
I'm not sure I know the inside dimension. It should show on the drawings that we have. The roof peak would be at 18.6.
Understand the roof peak. Okay, thank you.
Which matches what the addition would be.
I see the sketch of it there that we've got with it trying to frame the roof to get additional height inside of it. So thank you.
Okay.
Looks like around 12 feet, Supervisor Fisher. Is that what you see too? At the, not at the peak?
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? We've got a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And on to C, rezone. The petitioner is Clint Albert. Location is South 29 West 27340 Green Lane. Tax key is WAKT 1324990. This is for a recommendation to the town board. Planner Malarkey.
I provide an overview of my staff report at the during the public hearing. Did you want me to go through the whole thing again?
You do not have to, no.
I did prepare a list of conditions. There are 5 conditions. If the Plan Commission chooses to recommend this to the town board for approval, Some of the conditions include Waukesha County Comprehensive Plan Amendment that would be required for this to change the designation from low-density residential and environmental corridor to commercial with environmental corridor. We did speak with Waukesha County on this, and Waukesha County has this property and the two properties to the east are not planned for commercial, but the property to the north and then the properties further east are planned for commercial at this time. They understand that the town's comprehensive plan and the county's comprehensive plan differ in this regard. And the rationale that was given was that the three properties that are not zoned commercial but planned for commercial in the town are still primarily used for residential use, so they did not change the plan at the time. I think Jason Fruth mentioned that this may have been reviewed in 2009. Is that correct? Yeah, so that's their rationale. They also recommended one or two approaches if the comprehensive plan was changed, that either the applicant would present this petition to the county in conjunction with the two property owners to the east as part of his comprehensive plan request, or at least with letters from them as part of the request, or the petition would be presented to the county by the town board. So those are the two options, and there's actually an agenda item on the town board meeting to discuss that petition. We'd also condition that if this was approved, the rezone would not be in full force in effect until such time that the conditional use is granted or the petitioner obtains a conditional use from the town for the residence as a legal non-conforming use under B3 zoning. The petitioner shall have the environmental corridor delineated, the wetland delineated, obtains approval for a site plan of operation for the town, and that approval for the county for any erosion control or stormwater management that is necessary. And that was one of the items that was discussed in the public hearing comments, was the concern for stormwater and runoff and so on. And that's something that the county would look at as part of this, and we'd ask the county to look at as part of this going forward. The rezone would include the C1 overlay district would follow the delineated wetland boundary, and the environmental corridor overlay district would follow the boundary for the delineated wetland. And those are my major conditions on this.
Thank you. Engineer Janelli, comments?
I think Planner Malarkey and I had talked just real briefly, and given that this was mostly a rezone and no real public improvements involved, I didn't provide a formal written report, but there were some emails flying around about salt storage and things like that, and I think that some of the salt storage comments are in Planner Malarkey's comments, but given some of that stuff, I had suggested that we require as conditions of approval for the site plan the key provisions within Trans 277, which are those salt storage requirements.
And the site plan of operation is on the agenda tonight as a conceptual review only. That's a separate item on the agenda, which wouldn't necessarily be part of the rezone. The rezone would be conditioned on a future approval of the site plan of operation as well.
And I didn't comment on a rezone because it's a rezone and not much for me to comment on, really.
Mr. Albert, are you currently storing salt, and if so, how much? Yeah, come on up to the microphone, please. Thank you.
On my operation plan, I did have projected for a salt shack, but after speaking to Sean with the Trans 277, I believe the code was 225 feet from the well or 250 feet, which after doing my measurements, there's no way I could make do with my yard. So I'd have to eliminate that salt shack.
Okay. Supervisor Fisher?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it's really kind of a procedural question, and maybe Planner Malarkey or Attorney Macy, one or the other, both can help us. But I believe when we've looked at rezoning requests in the past, it's my recollection that we've typically kind of gone through a list of findings, basically pretty specific questions that have to be asked and answered if the rezoning would be approved. And I'm running a bit on memory, but primarily looking at adverse impacts, everything from traffic to lighting, to noise, adverse impact on neighbors, adverse impact on the environment. It's my understanding that kind of our charge is to make findings in regards to that before we render a decision. Can either one of you help me with that at all? I don't know whether that's in our ordinance or a general procedure thing, but actually having really some pretty specific questions that we need to address and come up with findings. Can either of you help me?
I know in the PUD conditional use section and granting a conditional use, there are certain findings that have to be made. But in terms of a standard rezone, I'm not aware of a section in the ordinance that requires that. Attorney Macy, do you have additional information?
I do not. I'm checking. I know that oftentimes we come up with a list of questions that or issues that need to be addressed from comments from the public. So that's correct. But I will check the code while you continue with your discussion. I'm not aware of anything in the code. I think we would have had it in the report.
I guess just to continue the discussion, and it may well not be in the ordinance, but I guess assuming for a minute it even isn't in the ordinance, I mean, can you give some guidance to the Plan Commission, I guess ultimately to the board, as to what our charge is? I think on anything in general, we need to look at those and kind of come up with our findings or conclusions, even if it isn't in the ordinance per se. I mean, rather than, I guess, to have something, I'm not suggesting it's arbitrary otherwise, but to really focus our attention on certain findings to determine whether we think it's appropriate or not.
Well, I guess I would add that what we're asking, the site plan of operation is a different item on the agenda. That we're going to go into some of the details on that. So what we're asking right now is whether it's rezoned conditioned on approval of that. And I think some of the findings have already been made when the town changed their comprehensive plan to commercial for the area. I wasn't part of that process, but this particular property was always viewed, at least since 2009, as a commercial property. Going forward, that would be rezoned. In fact, the properties directly adjacent are already zoned B3 use. Anything related to stormwater management, review of the buildings in the site, plan of operation would be addressed as part of the site plan of operation component of this. So all we're doing now, even if the rezone was granted by the Plan Commission and board at this time, is setting the stage for it. They'd have the rezone. They couldn't do anything with their property until they got a conditional use for the legal non-conforming home on the lot, and they got an approved site plan, which would go through all of those particular questions that I think you're asking about in terms of how compatible it is with the surrounding neighborhood.
Let me ask it in a little bit different way. Okay, assuming for the sake of discussion that the rezoning is approved. Okay, what then, educate me a bit? What's to say preclude somebody, or Mr. Albert decides that he doesn't want to proceed as he intended, sells the property or what or not? I mean, once it's rezoned, what manner is there to restrict anybody for using that for any purpose for permissible B3 zoning? I guess I'll pose it to you that way.
The rezone isn't in full force and effect until all those other things happen. So you're proving it conditional on the CU being approved and conditional on the site plan of operation being approved. So you're setting the stage, but you can't use the property in a commercial way until those things happen.
I understand he can't.
Let me flesh that out
a little different.
Right. The answer is the technical and the correct answer, that the first time on a rezoning, you can put reasonable conditions for rezoning it for the purpose for which the petition was made. Once those conditions are satisfied and it's rezoned, he can sell it and it can be used for any use in the B3 district.
If they secure a site plan of operation.
I said, once all the conditions have been satisfied, whatever conditions they put on it, and it is rezoned, then he can sell it and any B3 use can come in. They may need a conditional use also. They may decide to get rid of the house, and then they wouldn't even need the conditional use. So I'm agreeing with you. The first time you rezone, you can put reasonable conditions to make sure it's used only for the purpose for which the petition was filed. After that, and all the conditions are satisfied, though, we don't have control from allowing it to be used for any permitted B3 use. And I believe that was your question.
Yeah, that's my question, my point. And I guess, and then to that end, I mean, okay, so it's sold, be used, if somebody else purchases it or what, or not understand, there'd be plan of operation and site plan review. But at that point in time, if somebody comes through proposing to use it for some other purpose, but it's a permissible B3 use, I mean, unless there's something that is really out of bounds, I think the town would be hard put to prevent somebody from using it for that purpose, whatever it might be.
And you said something really out of bounds. If it's a permitted use, it's a permitted use.
That's what I said.
Yeah. So there's nothing that would, if it's a permitted use, it can't be out of bounds, really. So it would have to be approved. We agree.
I'm not sure we do. I guess I'll put it a different way. Let's just assume for a minute that this proceeds and we do plan of operation, site plan use and everything for Mr. Albert. And for whatever reason, that property gets sold. He never follows through on it. And a year later, somebody comes along and wants to use it for some other permissible B3 use, notwithstanding they'd have to come in with a plan of operation site plan, I think, but the town would basically pretty much have to permit that use for whatever would fit the B3 zoning.
Right.
Am I not correct on that?
Correct.
That's the point.
Just like the properties directly east of him that are already zone B3.
In answer to your first question, the only thing I can find in the code, it says upon completion of the public hearing, the Plan Commission will consider the testimony taken at the public hearing, along with the detailed development plan submitted to them by the applicant, along with any other pertinent information regarding the proposed amendment. It shall review all pertinent technical information and make a recommendation to the town board relative to whether or not the proposed amendment should be approved, modified, and approved or denied. So I'm not finding a lot of guidance, but that's what I did find.
Thank you. Other questions for the petitioner and or the planner? Is there a motion for a recommendation to the town board?
I make a motion that we approve subject to the conditions.
Is there a second?
Motion fails. There's no second.
Pardon?
The motion fails if there's no
Agreed.
second.
The motion, and if there is no second, the motion will fail.
Any other motion?
Is there any other motion? Seeing none, we can move on to D, site plan and plan of operation for Clint Albert at South 29 West 27 340 Green Lane.
Well,
Okay.
I got to tell you, it says the next code is upon receipt of the Plan Commission's recommendation relative to the proposed amendment. So we can send it with no recommendation, but I guess, is that the recommendation, that the Plan Commission has no recommendation? I just want the record to be clear.
Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion to deny the rezoning request and make that recommendation to the town board.
And is there a second?
I can second that.
Can we have some discussion as to your reasons, Mr. Fisher?
Yes, I believe the testimony that we have heard, I think there is concern about the compatibility of a proposed B3 use for that property with some of the adjacent residential properties. I also am concerned particularly because once that's rezoned, the town basically has no control over the use of it for any other permissible B3 zonings. I think those are the primary concerns that I would have, and that's my reason for my motion to deny.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Me.
Motion carries. On to E, site plan, I'm sorry. We're still on D, site plan and plan of operation for Clint Albert. Counselor, do we need to take any action on that since the rezone has been denied?
I was not here for action tonight, as your planner has indicated. It was merely for informational purposes to assist you with the rezoning and to give you the background information. That was not contemplated that action would be taken.
Okay, so we can move on past that. On to E, site plan of operation for Ryan Timms. Location is W246 South 2344 Industrial Lane, Unit B. Tax key is WAKT 13549650001. This is for a recommendation to the town board. Planner Malarkey.
Okay, the petitioner is requesting approval of a site plan of operation to relocate a pest control business, Midwest Pest Control, from South 30 West 24670 Sunset Drive to the subject property on Industrial Lane. The business will occupy Unit B within an existing building and will not require any site modifications or signage. They're proposing the plan of operation to be 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Saturday. Maximum number of employees, 3. There'll be a couple of company vehicles kept on site, which would include 2 pickup trucks to be stored indoors within the building and 2 cargo trailers, 18 feet and 23 feet, to be stored in the parking lot when not in use. Employees will park vehicles in the parking lot in the morning and then take a truck, a trailer, and then go out for the day for business. The unit itself will be used for parking the 2 vehicles and storage of service vehicles and equipment. Customer parking is not required for the site. In terms of the site plan, they aren't proposing any modifications to the site or building exterior. Employee parking and the cargo trailers are indicated on the site plan itself. I'll show you that. So basically 2 employee personal car spaces and then a couple of cargo trailers to be located behind an existing 6-foot-high wood privacy fence. Per section 13.2-4I1, outdoor storage is allowed, which does include vehicles and equipment. It's subject to the following. It's intended to only be in the rear yard only, as determined by the Plan Commission, but the side yard could be used if the Plan Commission determines the rear yard is not a practical location. In this particular case, the rear yard of the building, there really isn't a rear yard of the building or any location for storage, so the side yard is all that's left for storage of equipment. The storage should not be visible from the public right-of-way. Storage shall be bounded by a minimum 6-foot-high wooden fence, chain link fence, or landscape treatment as approved by the Plan Commission. Shall not exceed 20% of the lot area. And then stored items should be accessory to the approved business operation only. As I mentioned, there doesn't appear to be a rear yard location. The Plan Commission should determine if the side yard location of the cargo trailers to be located behind the existing privacy fence is acceptable with sufficient screening. I didn't have a photograph of the site, but from Google Street View, here's looking at the site from industrial. You can see the privacy fence, the wood privacy fence here. The trailers would be located behind that 6-foot-high privacy fence. Depending on the Plan Commission's recommendation, I have approved a list of 13 conditions.
Did you want to address any of those conditions, or are we good? They're standard.
I think they're pretty standard, except the plan of operation, as I described, is listed within them. Otherwise, pretty straightforward.
Is the petitioner here this evening? Good evening. Just out of curiosity.
Come on up to the
Yeah,
microphone, please. You get an opportunity to present anything further that you like and answer any questions.
I'm just curious, what kind of pests?
Any pest, bugs, rodents.
Okay, just curious. Okay. Questions for the petitioner and or the planner? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve subject to the conditions.
Second.
And the other thing we want to make sure you understand is the screening is very important because we've had complaints. And so the planner has indicated he feels that that's an appropriate screening, but please make sure the trailers stay behind the screening or we will get calls in this community, just so you know.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. On to F, site plan of operation for Sean Smith, 6 Diamond LLC. The business is Sticks Academy and Sports Training. Location is West 240 South 5225 Quincy Lane, Unit 3. Tax key is WAKT 140-199-7009. This is for a recommendation to the town board and is a modification to an existing site plan of operation. Planner Malarkey.
So this is an existing building that was approved for a academy and sports training facility. What they're asking for is a increase in the hours of operation due to increased demand. The plan of operation currently allows Monday through Sunday, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. They'd like to extend the hours on Friday and Saturday nights from November through April to be open until midnight. In addition, the petitioner is requesting the operation of the facility for overnight tournaments, 1 weekend per month from November through April. The hours of operation on these weekends then would be from Friday, 3 p.m. until Sunday, 10 p.m., basically anytime during that period. Although the existing plan of operation is for a sports training facility, the petitioner has stated that tournaments are currently held within the facility as part of the services. So that's something that needs to be discussed as part of the approval as to whether tournaments was intended as the original site plan of operation. And if not, would they be an approved use as per the requested amendment? In terms of parking, the original parking analysis that was done for Sticks is listed in the staff report. There's currently 84 parking stalls for the facility. This equates to about 1 parking stall per 1.2 patrons based on an approximate capacity of 100 people. That's not actually the capacity of the building. I spoke with the building inspector today. The actual capacity of the building is 500 people, so we're not limited by 100 patrons. The petitioners propose, so there's 84 parking stalls there. Approximately 100 people would use it a day per the petitioner, at least at the time of the original site plan. Not all at the same time. Each patron would use the facility for approximately 90 minutes at a time, and approximately 90% of the patrons are picked up and dropped off at the indoor sports facility because they're not of legal age to drive. At the time, it was agreed that there was plenty of parking associated with the use. I've since spoke to the petitioner and asked about parking on the site, and according to the petitioner, there's usually plenty of parking on the site and no more than 2/3 to 3/4 filled at any one time. In terms of tournament play on the site, tournaments are already existing on the property now as part of a sports training facility. I think it's important maybe to clarify at this time in terms of adding tournaments into the site plan of operation amendment if the plan commission chooses to do so. My analysis for parking is as follows. Basically, after speaking with the petitioner, each team will have, so there's only 1 field in the facility now. Only 2 teams can play at any one time, a full game. Each team will have about 12 players for about 24 players at any one time. Players may be accompanied by parents, so there may be up to 24 cars parked outside at any one time for a game. If you consider overlap between games, maybe there's 48 cars parked at any one point. taking up 48 spaces, in addition to coaches and other visitors. It's my opinion that 84 parking spaces is enough for tournament play with a facility with one field, but the Plan Commission should determine if the existing parking area is adequate to support tournament uses as described. The original site plan of operation was also approved in Tom Kelnick's name with 5 diamonds. That's because at the time the condo was being developed, the condo plat was being developed, as well as the building was being constructed at the time. So the plan of operation was in his name. He is not involved, to the best of my understanding, with the operation of the Sticks Sports Facility. So this particular plan of operation should be granted to Sean Smith and Sticks, and that all the conditions of the previous site plan that was granted to Tom Kelnick and 5 Diamonds should be tacked down to Sean Smith's approval of this amendment, so that it's all in his name going forward. My conditions for if the Plan Commission chooses to recommend approval include the hours of operation and the addition of the use of a facility as for tournament use.
Thank you. And is the petitioner here this evening? Yes. Come on up. Good evening. We have questions for the petitioner and or the planner?
I just have one question. Has there been any complaints about your hours of operation?
Not one. Not to us directly.
Okay. Have you had any complaints, or has the board or the town any complaints about the operation period?
Absolutely not.
I did receive one complaint that he was open earlier in the morning than he was allowed to be. And when I asked what the problem, what problem did it create, there was no answer. But I do want to make it clear that I did receive one complaint.
Echoing John's sentiment, I did have some complaints too brought to me about, part of it was the landscaping that wasn't done until recently, I believe now in December, they finally got some shrubs planted around there.
All the trees have been planted, that we're just waiting for the last of it to go in the spring. They ran out of time.
What about, I'm kind of questioning, was there a berm post for the north side of the building with trees planted on that too?
There is.
Pardon me?
There is. I don't think it's real high, but there is the water retention right there, and it's kind of bermed up there. And I believe there's 4 trees along that side.
That was brought to my attention that it wasn't happening, so I'm just asking.
Yeah.
And what about the silt fence around the place yet?
That would be up to the building owner that built it. I'm just a tenant.
That's some of my concerns, I guess. Some of the neighbors have the silt fence was put on the people to the west property, actually. Shouldn't have been there in the first place, but it's still there, I guess. But these are some of the things that people have complained about. And I know you said you don't own the building, but this is the place and time to bring it up or not, that we can get some of that stuff caught up.
All right.
My question is the timing. I mean, it finally did get done, but I mean, I had complaints all summer long, wanting to know why things weren't getting done around there. You know?
Is there a specific time frame that that's supposed to get done in?
It's supposed to have been done a year ago this fall was the attempt, but I told these people, I said, look, it got done kind of late, frost. I said, wait till spring. And I kind of hoped it would have been done by spring, but it just got done this past month or two. So
I think the question is, and I know I attended one staff meeting, we looked at it a bit, maybe Planner Malarkey, maybe you can get us up to date, but I mean, there was original landscaping plan that was presented and approved. And I guess a little background, that was when, and that was never acted upon, and what is it that's in the process of being done now? I mean, I have a concern. We approved a landscaping plan and give us the date on that, and that basically that never got done.
I don't
help us out.
Yeah, I don't have the exact date, but as part of the site plan of operation, there was a landscape plan that was approved for the facility. And the landscaping wasn't constructed immediately after it was approved. Earlier late last year, a new landscape plan was shared with us because they were contemplating changing some things based on the fact that they weren't happy with the old plan. in terms of some of the plant materials and so on. They've since gone back to the old plan and have planted it, as far as I know, according to the old plan, with some additional plant material as well.
We actually exceeded what was expected of us with the number of points and things like that. The builder changed the parking lot a little bit and didn't have the islands, so we changed it to add more plantings.
I guess the problem I've got, and I understand you may not be the building owner or whatever, but I mean, that comes before a lot of discussion before the town here. It's a specific plan. There's a lot of time and effort spent in reviewing that. There's discussion about it. I mean, there were specific comments made by many, myself included, about the sufficiency, the landscaping. I mean, most communities, maybe not most, but many communities, you basically don't get an occupancy permit unless your landscaping is finished. There might be some considerations given for time of year to give a bit of grace. Many communities require people to put some money down on the table. You basically don't get that to get your landscaping. I mean, this has gone on forever. We get the complaints of it, and it basically makes a mockery of the process. And I'm not at all pleased about that we have to listen to complaints and that type of thing, because this goes on forever. How can we, with any credibility, expect any other petitioner that comes before us to present something credibly, expect it's going to get done, and then they simply don't do it? I mean, even comments about, well, geez, somebody decided not to put in the islands or decided not to put in the berm or what or not. That's not the prerogative of somebody to simply go ahead and do that when we've approved something else. And I'm not trying to take you to the woodshed here tonight, because maybe your fingerprints aren't that much on it, but this puts us in a very difficult situation. And I guess we got to go looking forward from here, but this has dragged on forever, and it's inexcusable.
How much of the landscaping is left to be completed at this point?
As far as I know,
original plan, sorry.
Just 2 little plantings up front. So 2 little areas. What would that be? East of the parking lot, in that big island area.
And who's responsible for putting that in?
Trees on the Move.
Who, building owner or tenant?
Tenant.
Okay. And how long have you been in there?
Just over a year.
Okay. Any special reason it hasn't gotten done in just over a year?
The busy season of moving over there and learning the operations over there. So,
unfortunately, at least for some of us, that's not good enough to say I've been busy this past year. And I desire not to be argumentative or what or not, but think if you were sitting on this side of the table and people come in. I mean, we've got a bunch of stuff on the agenda tonight. People come in and say, geez, I'm really sorry, I've been busy. You gave me the approval. We take that on good faith on people's representations. People aren't real enthusiastic then about looking at changing the rules, which is the extended hours of operation, plan of operation. If people aren't enthused about that based on past performance, can you blame them?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I have a comment on that landscaping issue too. Back when we granted your place or down there, we had an option to put veneer brick on your building. And if my recollection calls correctly, we denied that you did not have to put any brick veneer on the outside of your building if you would put some substantial large trees on your premises to help landscape that at the end of time. And I don't think that has been done either.
when was the last time you were out the property?
I think we're talking 12, 15-foot trees.
They are planted on the side.
12 to 15 footers.
I believe they are.
Well, I had, again.
May I ask you a question? Have you seen the original landscaping plan that was approved, you personally?
Yes.
Okay, and then you have proposed to make some modifications to that?
I don't know if I proposed it. I took it to Trees on the Move, and they did what they were supposed to do. They thought it was supposed to be based on a plant or a number system. And it was modified based on how the parking lot was finished. And we added extra plantings.
And who
throughout.
approved changes to the parking lot?
That I can't answer.
And again, but I mean, do you understand the concept of the
Yes, sir.
approval of a site plan?
Yes, sir.
I guess I'll go a bit, maybe Planner Malarkey or something to answer it. Has anybody been out there to do an inspection or anything to see what in fact has been done versus what we approved?
No, in fact, I have limited experience with the property. I did not know that the parking lot was changed and did not match the approved landscape plan, site plan. And I was under the impression that the landscaping had been completed to date recently. So no, I didn't know there was an issue with the property.
And I'm not suggesting that's your responsibility. I mean, you're new to the process here, appreciate that. And maybe that's something that the town board has to consider in terms of who's responsible or how we follow up on those things. I'm not sure we're going to resolve that tonight, but I mean, if we have situations where we approve, I mean, this is a big project. It's a big building, one of the biggest buildings in the town of Waukesha. And if we don't have some checks and balances or what or not on seeing whether people are actually doing what we've approved, then I think we got a problem. We may not get that resolved tonight, but we should not have to be spending time at town plan commission and town board meetings many months or years after the fact, wondering why things aren't done that were promised. It just isn't good business for the town of Waukesha.
I agree, and I would ask that Clerk Nicholas puts that on the next staff meeting agenda so that we can get a system in place to address following up on these types of items. Janelle, you don't have much to do.
Tell me where to go and I'll go there.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to table the request that's before us for the site plan and plan of operation amendment request. And my move is to table it without a date certain, but merely to table it.
Is there a second?
Chairman, could I ask a question?
Not after a motion to table is made. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Tabled to a date uncertain. On to G, site plan of operation, amendment to change petitioner's name, hours of operation, and the ability to hold tournaments. Once again, I think, Counselor, do we need to address this?
There's two different units. So
Oh, I'm sorry, this is
Sean
for Unit
started
2.
it, We did G.
Yep.
Now we have to go back up.
So I apologize, that we were on G, correct? Or, no, we were on F.
When you said amendment, I figured that was the one you were talking about, was the previous one.
Okay, so now you've got me confused.
Regardless, we're going to the dog food warehouse property next.
Right, that's Unit 2.
Yep.
Okay, so we're correct. Okay.
Correct.
On to Unit 2, petitioner Sean Smith, the owner is Kunze Properties LLC, John E. Kunze, business is Sticks Academy and Sports Training. Location is West 240, South 5225, Kunze Lane, Unit 2. Tax key is WAKT 14019970008. This is for a recommendation to the town board. Planner Malarkey.
So the petitioner currently leases this building as part of their as part of their lease of the building to the north, the Sticks training facility. This is condominium unit 2. This was previously used as a pet store and is currently vacant. They are proposing the facility be used for small group skill training and specialized activities such as baseball, fast pitch softball, and lacrosse. They anticipate about 1 to 6 athletes and 1 to 2 coaches using the facility at any one time. Training sessions would be approximately 50 to 60 minutes. Most of the players dropped off and picked up by parents. They're not proposing any interior or exterior renovations except installation of protective netting around the play area to protect walls, lighting, and then the installation of indoor, outdoor turf carpeting, and then general maintenance, including painting and updating to the restrooms. Again, this is an extension to the existing Sticks Academy and Training Facility directly north on Unit 3 of the condo. This was before a very similar request. It's been slightly modified. This was before the Plan Commission and Board in December 2016. That was tabled at the time to request additional information by the Plan Commission and Board. I did review the minutes from that meeting to determine what the discussion was. And it's my understanding that the outstanding issues related to the parking on the site, as well as whether the building needed any state building code approval for a change in use due to its size. I did speak to the town building inspector in terms of building use and certification of occupancy. The total building area is about 7,600 square feet in size. The netted play area is about 4,500 square feet in area. The town building inspector did tell me that the facility can be approved by the town for the proposed use. It's under the square foot and volumetric requirements for approval by the town. Based on the number of occupants and the square footage, the IBC classifies the building as type B, which does not require sprinklers. The building, however, cannot have an occupant load over 15, which would need to be posted inside the facility. So anything over 15 would need a change, would need sprinklers. An occupant load increased to a maximum 49, so that's the next step up. We need the installation of additional bathroom, one for men and one for women, to provide potable water, either through drinking fountain or water cooler. Building inspector would also require proper egress and exit lights and signs, clear egress paths to the exterior, and a slop sink. And they'd want to inspect it along with the fire department before it was open to the public. They're not proposing to modify anything in regard to the existing site plan or landscaping at this time. Their plan of operation would be for the use would be an indoor sports training facility. Hours of operation would be between Monday to Friday, 3 p.m. to 9 p.m., and Saturday and Sunday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. There'd be 2 coaches at any one time, and the estimated number of participants, athletes, would be 6 persons. There would be no company vehicles as part of this. In terms of parking, the code does not require specific parking numbers for a private commercial recreation facility, but similar to the building to the north, using some rationale, we can determine what would be a fair amount of parking. Previously, when this is in front of the Plan Commission and Board in 2016, they proposed 25 parking stalls. The Plan Commission requested, because the site plan didn't show them, the Plan Commission requested to see those 25 parking stalls outlined on the site plan. They have come back with 21 parking stalls, including 2 handicap spaces. Again, the application states that no more than 2 coaches and 6 athletes will use the facility at any one time. Most athletes dropped out by their parents. My rationale is that even if every athlete was accompanied by a parent, that would require no more than 8 spaces per training session. With turnover and overlap, maybe that would require 16 total vehicle spaces. They have 21. I believe that there is ample parking on the site for the proposed use. If the Planning Commission should choose to recommend approval to the board, I have prepared a list of 15 conditions, including the plan of operation and a maximum building occupancy of 15 persons.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Fisher.
Help me out. I think I'm missing something here, but I do recall that when this came to us initially, and that was, did you say December of 2016? And I realize that's not on your watch, so you're trying to reconstruct this. But at that point in time, the town board and or town plan commission did not act to approve the site plan?
Table.
Tabled. And the plan of operation was
Everything was tabled.
tabled. Then the question I've got, and I must be missing something here, but how can we be considering an amendment to the site plan and plan of operation if we never approved it? Am I missing something?
This is not
It's
an
gotta be
amendment. This is
simple.
not an amendment. This is a site plan of operation. If it's on the agenda that way, it's not correct. It's an actual site plan.
Right.
plan
Are
of
we on
operation.
G? Okay, well, then there's my confusion. That's the way it's noticed. I don't know how we can be considering an amendment. I mean, are they using the facility?
No.
They have never used it at all. Nobody's
Not-
ever set foot in there?
Well, sure, maybe they lease it. It's their facility. They don't conduct operations out of it. If there's equipment stored in there, that's a possibility, but they don't use it to conduct training sessions or anything associated with the sticks operation.
Well, I don't know where we go from here. Maybe Attorney Macy or somebody else, but I think we got a mess if we're talking about an amendment to something we never approved.
So there is some Supervisor Fisher, to clarify, the agenda is a little unclear. The amendment is for F, the site plan and plan of operation. The amendment should have been up on agenda item F. Site plan and plan of operation only is for building number 2, and that is owned by the Kunze Properties. And that is a facility that we're talking about now, the smaller one of 7,600 square feet, not the larger building. And I wasn't, they are not operating out of building 2 currently.
Correct.
Okay. And I do recall some conversation about this back some time ago, and Chief Buchholz is in the audience, and Chief, maybe you can address, because I know there was some confusion as to whether or not that building needed to be sprinkled based on volumetric size. Can you weigh in on that?
The planner addressed that. It's based on the number of people they're going to have in there. They're going to be under that. The square footage is under that. So it doesn't have to be sprinkler. They've changed their net configuration and stuff, so the exits are all accessible and stuff. So what we've seen, what was given to us, is their plan for this building is meets fire codes.
Thank you. Questions for the petitioner and or the planner?
Let me
Commissioner
verify
Stiegler?
something. I'm sorry. Did you say there's going to be 6 kids on the team? Is this baseball?
This is just a training facility
Okay.
where kids come in to get instruction from
So
coaches.
it's not
and-
full teams, in other
and
words.
there's not a field here. It's just big enough to have some nets and to throw and hit some balls.
This originally was a warehouse, and I'm just curious as to how that's all going to work. Is it going to meet, it's going to be meeting code after this for a recreational facility versus a warehouse?
According to the town building inspector, it meets code.
Okay.
Supervisor Fisher, just for clarification, since you're a professional architect and engineer, is there a difference between warehouse classification and perhaps recreational as far as building construction types, not building code types, but the construction of the building?
You're actually talking, I think, two different things. You're talking about use and you're talking about the class of construction for the building. And I think the question is, I'll take for a minute what Planner Malarkey presented, went through with the building inspector, but then there will be, if we were to look on this, there are restrictions on the number of people that can occupy that building at any point in time, correct?
15 would be the maximum.
And I guess I just have to wonder aloud, is that a reasonable expectation that building occupancy is never going to exceed 15 people? I mean, persuade me that I don't have a reason to be a bit suspect.
I guess that's a question for the petitioner. Come on up and address it, please.
We are just doing individual lessons and small group training in that building, just to allow for more stuff at the other building, at the new building. So it's all small group training and private lessons.
So give me a number.
2 coaches and probably six players at one time.
That'd be the maximum ever.
That's our plan, yes.
What about
Yeah,
parents?
It can't be just a plan.
Parents.
It's got to be set in stone.
Yes.
Would-
If you ever had a fire there and you don't have sprinklers in it, you've got 20 kids in there, somebody's gonna get a lot of trouble.
Correct.
I guess a question for Attorney Macy, even if we're inclined to do it, can we act on this tonight the way this is worded in the agenda?
Well, I think that's a good question. The guidance that the courts have given us is whether or not the public would be in any way misled or would not have notice of what you might be doing. Since the site plan and plan of operation is listed under both of them, I'm fairly comfortable that a court would say that you're acting on a site plan and plan of operation, and the public would not have been misled by that factor. And one of the reasons is the caveats that are on there about changing the name and the times and things like that. Since it's a site plan and plan of operation, you may decide you're going to add other conditions or you're going to reduce conditions. So I think with the guidance that has the public been misled, I wouldn't think they would necessarily. I think reasonable notice has been given, but that's really a decision you could respectfully disagree with me on and table it and say that you want it noticed otherwise.
Let me back it up one way a little bit. And I mean, we passed by, I guess, item F, and maybe that should have been done the other way, but I'd like to make sure this isn't a sleight of hand on this. The plan of operation for the big building is presently in whose name?
Tom Kelnick, 5 Diamonds.
So, and I understand we didn't act on that tonight, but I mean, can these things simply be passed from one person to another? I guess that's another question. Is there an issue in that, or do we need to?
No, it's not a conditional use. It's a site plan, a plan of operation. If a business would sell to a partner in the business or an employee in the business, that employee would be obligated to come in and get their own site plan and plan of operation approved, even if it was the exact same business, if they had issued it to an individual. So as long as the use is a permitted use, you can approve a site plan and plan of operation for a different petitioner. I don't, there's no legal reason.
Okay, which is fair enough, but we're not really with the big building, and I know we're going back to it, we're really not talking about a site plan for that tonight, are we?
Well, only in the regard that the original approved site plan would be transferred into Sean Smith's name as part of Sticks.
And then we're back into the
Wait,
ditch about the
you're talking
landscaping
about-
again.
You're talking about F. We're past that already.
He said he was,
I
but he's
understand.
just asking some questions. Let me clarify. The site plan, I would say, should be on there because you were going to talk about extending the hours. You were going to talk about the potentiality of having tournaments, and all of those things would go to the site plan as to whether or not you had enough parking. So I do think the site plan would be pertinent and should always be listed as the potential discussion on the site plan and plan of operation, as well as you may want additional landscaping, additional screening. So please don't take off site plan. My recommendation is we always list site plan and plan of operation.
I want to back up for just a second and ask Supervisor Fisher, if you know, is there a difference between construction types for a warehouse use versus a recreational use like they're proposing now? So it was originally a warehouse, now it's going to be a recreational use. Would those two buildings have been constructed the same way? Or if you know?
Not, I think I know, not necessarily, but it's going to depend on the occupancy load. I mean, where a lot of that really kicks in is if you get like into an assembly function of more than 50 people. So probably not for that limited number of people. I mean, a warehouse thing, I mean, you could do something with frame construction if we're talking less than 15 people or that type of thing. I don't think there'd be a difference.
Okay. I didn't think that we got that cleared before. Thank you. I can't speak intelligent to that. I don't know. Thank you.
And not to belabor the point, and I know we've kind of commingled these things, but my concern is, yes, consider site plan. I mean, we're being asked to consider a site plan, but yet we never even, there's not even a satisfaction or assurance. In fact, it appears though it wasn't even perfected what was approved over a year ago. So I'm not even sure what sense it makes to consider stuff when what was originally intended was never even fulfilled.
But I think we're talking about two mutually exclusive issues. One is the larger building that was constructed, and now we're talking about the smaller existing building.
I don't disagree, but I mean, we've got a mess on the agenda and stuff. I mean, someone's going to have to go back and look at the film tonight and figure out what we were talking about. I mean, it's not real clear to me.
Last meeting, you mean?
No, he's talking about tonight. Are you going to turn that into a motion?
I'd recommend a motion to table it until a lot of these questions can be answered.
To a date certain or uncertain?
Uncertain.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to H, zoning code change. Petitioner is the town board. Location is our ordinance 13-2-15 sub H, sign illumination. This is for a recommendation to the town board. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
In a second. I got Stigler. Is there discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to I, conceptual, at this point, it would be appropriate for me to excuse myself and for the plan commission to elect a new chair. You elected somebody.
Does anybody want to go through the procedure we went through again to elect a temporary chairperson? Or would you like me to continue? Okay. All right, item number I, 6I on the agenda this evening is a conceptual development review, petitioner John Merrick, location Highway 164 south of Glendale, tax key WAKT 1404996 and WAKT 142999. And I'd simply note for the record that Chairman Merrick, who is the petitioner, has stepped down from the board table to resume a new role. Are you starting the discussion, Madam Larkey?
Yeah, I can do that.
First, I get to give my warnings. And I did this for the Merrill Hills project, and I will do it whenever there's going to be a quasi judicial. We're here to listen. The code requires, as Mr. Malarkey correctly pointed out to me, that there be a conceptual review. But the purpose of the conceptual review under the law is only twofold. One is to make sure the application is complete, the applications are complete and ready to proceed to the next steps. And secondly, for you to comment on what you expect to see at the public hearing. You cannot opine as to whether you're in favor of the project, opposed to the project, concerns with the projects. That's the purpose of the testimony at the public hearing and the input from the neighbors. So I just want to remind everybody that we're here to listen. Whatever he says tonight, he has to say at every one of the other public hearings, just so you know. There could be a potentiality, as I understand it, of 3 public hearings on this matter and through the course of the processes, up to 3 conditional or public hearings. And so again, you're here just to comment on whether you think the application's complete, that the staff has done its job and made sure that the application is complete. And secondly, to say things like, when you come back to the public hearing, we expect to see blank. Does everybody understand? I know I made that same comments prior to the Merrill Hills presentations, and I wanted to make them again. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Attorney Macy. I was going to actually ask you to provide that clarification. Appreciate that. So everybody stands it. Okay, Sean, proceed.
Thank you. So this is conceptual review for a comprehensive plan amendment a rezoning and a residential PUD conditional use. The property is located near the southwest corner of 164 and Glendale Road. There's 34.29 acres that's currently owned by the school district of Waukesha. The property is currently zoned A1 agricultural. The proposed zoning on the property is R2 single family residence with a PUD conditional use. The town of Waukesha comprehensive plan currently plans the property for commercial office use. The petitioner is requesting conceptual review of a proposed development of 21 two-family townhomes, 42 total dwelling units, just south of Waukesha Bible Church on 164. The units will be two-bedroom rentals and include a mix of two-story and ranch units ranging from 1,326 square feet to 1,760 square feet. The development will be modeled after the Overlook Townhomes development located on State Trunk Highway 59, Arcadian Avenue in the town of Waukesha. A development review team meeting was held with Waukesha County staff on December 19th to discuss the proposed project. I'm just going to pull up a map here. So you can see the proposed property here. Here's Glendale Road going east-west, and 164 is going north-south. The property is in pink here. There's it's not the entire pink area here you see here west of the church. A portion of that property is the church property. This is basically a 75-foot wide strip that comes down to meet the remainder of the property that's planned for commercial office use. So the petitioner is requesting an amendment to the town comprehensive plan from commercial office to low density residential. For the development, the church directly north is planned as government institutional, which is blue, and a portion of their property is also commercial office. Land to the west of the property is environmental corridor, as well as the yellow area here to the west and to the northwest is suburban density residential 2. Land north of Glendale Road is also suburban density residential 2. Directly north of Glendale Road is the properties we just got done discussing, is planned for commercial use on the south end, and then mixed use as you go further north. Across 164, directly across the subdivision across the way is planned for suburban density residential to the northeast, and then low density residential directly east. So there's a variety of comprehensive plan land use categories and a variety of uses in this area. In terms of actual uses, the east side of 164 is generally residential subdivisions on the east side. To the north, as I mentioned before, was the property we just discussed. There's an animal hospital here, some ag uses. There's the Sticks sports facility. The church, Waukesha Bible Church, is here, and there's some residential uses as well to the west. The property in question, as well as the portion of the property to the west of the schools, are the only places in the town where commercial office is planned. That's not to say that commercial office development couldn't also happen in the commercial areas and the mixed use areas as well, but it's the only place that's planned exclusively for commercial office use. And commercial office is defined as, in the comprehensive plan, as land where service and office activities such as an office park will be designated, typically near arterial roadways. There are several areas for commercial or mixed uses in the town comprehensive plan. If I zoom out here a little bit here and you look for the red areas along 164, there's a few areas planned. There's other areas planned and used as commercial use on Sunset Drive, on Genesee Road, which is here, and then the small area we talked about earlier north of Green Lane, which is planned for commercial use as well. If you look just at the 164 corridor in the vicinity of the project, so here's the project site here, and here's the other in red and the mixed use and commercial areas, there's about 120 to 130 acres of undeveloped land remaining in those commercial and mixed use planned areas. So just to give you a sense of how much remaining land, if this was changed from commercial office to residential, what would be left undeveloped. In terms of compatibility of uses for two-family units, I think we could argue that would be compatible with the church to the north. There's an existing buffer of trees on the west portion of property that divides the existing single-family homes to the west. That could also be strengthened potentially with increased landscaping. Properties to the east, the subdivision across the way, what's actually being proposed as part of the development, I'm going to zoom in here. The townhomes are on a road that would come off of Glendale Road with two cul-de-sacs, and the septic areas would be east of that. So there's a considerable distance between the edge of those homes in the single-family neighborhood to the east, and then the rest of the development is basically buffered by environmental corridor, woodlands, and wetlands, and so on. So in addition to a town comprehensive plan amendment that would be required from commercial office to suburban density residential, you'd also need a comprehensive plan amendment at the county level from suburban density residential to low density residential. County staff has stated that at the development review team meeting that the requested increase in density seems logical given the location and mixed uses of the area. So they already have this plan for residential use, and county staff was at least amenable to the idea of increasing the density on that property for their comprehensive plan as well. In terms of zoning, property zone A1 agriculture right now. In order to achieve the density that they're asking for on the site, the property would need to be zoned R2, single family residence with a conditional use PUD put on it. Going through some very brief calculations here. Property is 34.29 acres. That's 1.4 million square feet of area. In the density calculations, you can count up to 20% of the wetlands on the site. So there's a considerable amount of wetlands on the site, which about 402,000 of them would not count to the calculation. If the petitioner provides at least 50% open space on the site, which would include up to 20% of the wetlands as well, they could actually achieve 40 potential units given a PUD conditional use. So they're asking, the application shows 42 units, but that was done at a time when they didn't have a complete boundary survey and wetland delineation. So our code under R2 zoning with PUD would only allow 40, a maximum of 40 units here. So that would need to be adjusted. And they're proposing 63% total open space. R2 zoning is not as used as heavily as R1 zoning in the town, but it is used. It's scattered throughout the town in various areas along arterial roadways and adjacent to the cities as well. So R2 zoning of this particular property wouldn't necessarily be out of place as it is along State Trunk Highway 164 or with access very near. Waukesha County has no shoreline zoning on the subject parcels, but there's a stream that goes across the southern portion of the property. They've asked the petitioner to have that delineated in terms of, or determined in terms of navigability. If it's determined that's navigable by DNR standards, then shoreline zoning would apply, which would be a 300-foot buffer for county zoning. The county said they'd only be involved in the zoning process if any buildings would happen to fall within that shoreline zoning jurisdiction. Otherwise, they would waive their rights to enforce county shoreline zoning on the property. And I think as it stands now, based on approximation, it doesn't look like there's any buildings necessarily within that. So shoreline zoning is probably not going to be an issue. In terms of access, as I mentioned before, the homes would access via private drive onto Glendale Road. There would be no access on State Trunk Highway 164. However, in order to do my due diligence, I did contact DOT. to determine if they would entertain a access point on 164, whether it happened to be commercial or was a residential use. And according to them, they prefer that no access be located on 164 for either of these properties. However, they would at least consider a petition for access under 164 if these properties were developed together. And that access location would be located at the existing median. There's a median cut on 164 at the time. They said that that's where the location would need to be, and depending on how the operation functioned, it could be restricted depending right turn out, XL, decel lanes if need be. The point I'm trying to get at is I just wanted to see if it's a viable commercial property or a viable residential property. And I think based on the configuration of the site and potential access to either Glendale Road or 164, that it could be developed either way as residential or commercial use. I do want to point out, if the northern property was developed by itself without the portion of the southern property added to it, that DOT would not entertain a access location at the time, because the deeds for these particular properties require that only one access point be granted. The northern property already has access on the Glendale Road. The southern property does not. So no matter what, that would be granted an access. But if developed independently, or at least they consider an access for that one independently. A certified survey map may be required for this property. It's currently 2 parcels. So I would recommend that those be combined into one parcel as part of a certified survey map, since this is going to be one single entity operating as a rental unit. County staff also has in their plans the large wetland that's associated with within the environmental corridor to the south of the property. They have that slated as a potential future county park, and they've asked that the petitioner consider either locating that on a separate outlot and dedicating it to the county for preservation purposes, or describing it and placing restrictions on the property for environmental corridors. So it would basically be the wetland plus 25 feet offset from the wetland that would need to be preserved. Also on the certified survey map, the cul-de-sac lengths for these proposed private drives are just under what's required for to meet ordinances. Currently, the longest cul-de-sac according to our ordinances is 1,320 feet. This one that's called Rolling Meadows Drive is 1,318 lineal feet in length. The cul-de-sac bulbs also meet requirements in our land division ordinance as well. Basically, this would be served by the 2-family development would be served by private sewer and septic systems. There basically be shared systems for the units similar to Overlook. There'd be up to 4 units on each sanitary waste system and up to 8 units on each well system. The well locations aren't currently shown on the site plan. The county has requested additional soil borings to ensure suitability of soils and that the location of wells and septics are appropriate as shown on the CSM. Stormwater for the site is proposed for the southwest corner of the development. The county has preliminarily reviewed that in terms of size, and they provided a few comments. They did mention that it probably will be a wet pond according to the soil conditions that would require a liner because of groundwater fluctuation. And they also mentioned that certain roadside swales might be counted as well toward meeting the stormwater management requirement. They had some concerns with the topography at the north end on the west side of the site, just the way the water drained, and they want to make sure that the petitioner, when preparing the topo for the site on the west edge, made sure that the water got back to the stormwater pond at the south portion of the site. Again, this is conceptual only, so the petitioner has not submitted a complete set of drawings for site plan of operation approval. We'd ask that they do that coming forward. County staff also suggested additional landscaping be placed on the west portion of the property to make sure that there was proper buffer to the residences to the west. As I mentioned before, there's some vegetation there already. They did ask for additional vegetation there. In terms of architecture, the petitioner has submitted conceptual plans for the architecture. What I'd ask the Plan Commission to consider in the future going forward, Section 13-2-F1 talks about building materials for retail, service, multifamily and office uses, that 50% be the exteriors be brick, masonry, glass, EIFS, etc., or other appropriate facade as may be approved by the Plan Commission and Board. These buildings are primarily horizontal lap siding, so the Plan Commission will need to determine if the materials and architecture as presented are appropriate in terms of the spirit and intent of the ordinance. And then finally, they're not proposing any signage at this point, but any signage would need to be reviewed per Section 13-215 of the Waukesha Code of Ordinance. Again, this is conceptual only, so there isn't any action that's going to be taken tonight. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Petitioner, would you like to make a presentation?
And Planner Malarkey touched on a lot of the points that I wanted to bring up, and I would like to start with the zoning map for the town of Waukesha. I've highlighted the areas of R2 zoning, highlighted in red, in the red squares that you can see, and they're all on arterial roads in the town of Waukesha. None of them in subdivisions, just like the proposed zoning for what I'm talking about on Highway 164. Regarding 40 units, I will show you a revised plan that has the 40 units on it now, since that came to our attention. So the revised plan shows the 40 units rather than the 41 units here. There's an addition of a service garage and or a clubhouse at the far north side. Additionally, there's an updated stormwater management plan that cuts a larger swale on the north side of the property, west side of the property, sorry, that will force all the water into the retention pond. Ultimately, it will flow off into the wetlands. The wetlands are delineated here, and I have agreed to transfer those lands for permanent conservation to the county or some other conservation district. Soil septic systems all located on the far east side of the property. The soil borings that the county requested for additional borings, we did additional, I think, 15 or 17 borings there. We're satisfied with those borings. The septic systems are conventional on this site. The soil commission comply with that. The well locations are listed on this site plan as well as the locations of the septic tanks. We anticipate using a nitrification tank in addition to the normal septic tank, which will render the water going into the septic field. Here is rainbow, if you want to do that. Which increases the life of the field and the cleanliness of the water coming in. There's been some talk about high seasonal groundwater that's located. Those high groundwater are all on the west side of the property. Where the septic fields are located, those high groundwater are 10 to 15 feet below the surface, and septic fields won't be affected by that. Even at the building site, we still won't be affected because we're flat on grade with a turn down edge of grade beam structure, which is only 18 inches deep, and we will not get anywhere near the groundwater. Seasonal high groundwater there, somewhere on 5 feet, depending on where you're at. It is, as the planner mentioned, a private road. The town will not be responsible for any maintenance or upkeep, power, snow, salt-thrown roads, and repair You should also have a landscape plan provided in your packet. It complies with the point system that the town of Waukesha has adopted. The additional screening that the county had mentioned is along here on Rolling Meadows Drive, between the home that is to the west. There is no lighting, there's no street lights. The plan for lighting is consistent with what we did at Overlook, which is a single coat light at each unit with a 23-watt lamp in it. We conducted a traffic study at Overlook, and we are averaging 104 cars per day. At full occupancy, we're 5 units short at full occupancy. That would equate to 119 cars a day. At the last study that the DOT did on Glendale Road, there were 722 cars a day. That was in 2009. We asked for an increase. You're at about 800 cars a day. And then if you increase that with the 120 cars from a new development, you'd be somewhere in the neighborhood of 900, 950 cars a day. Glendale Road is constructed for 8,000 cars a day. So there's no chance that we're going to overwhelm Glendale Road with additional traffic. We will be using private wells. The impact on the groundwater will be near zero, as all of the water gets returned to the ground through the shallow Waukesha through the septic system. Any additional waters that didn't get returned, the small amount that is consumed or evaporated off or gone to the water would be made up by nearly 35 inches of rain and 40 inches of snow that this area receives on an annual basis. That's all I have. If you have questions for me.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll go to the members of the Plan Commission. Again, just a reminder, as Attorney Macy reminded us, any of your comments should be directed to the completeness of the presentation, not offering any opinions at this point in time, because there'll be public hearings coming along if this is indeed to go forward, but you do need to express your thoughts or opinions on what you need to see for additional information as this moves forward. You want to spend a minute and just go through the materials as long as you put those up there,
Sure.
please?
So this is all the materials we'll be using the same thing we used at Overlook, which is LP products. They call it Smart Side and pre-finished product. Carries up to a 25-year warranty on the finishes, and there's a variety of colors that we use on it. We mix up the buildings, the colors on the buildings, so that it's not all one look within the property. So if you ventured over to Overlook, you see a multiple different types of buildings, and the age garage inside and we put front and so you can give the neighborhood character, and then a very simple dimensional shingle. Thank you very much, and the color that we require.
Okay, who would like to speak?
I'll start. Is that okay? I just have a couple for you. I'll go down the list. I guess the first one that's on the list is the stream that's in the wetland area. I'd like to know what that stream is. I believe it's called Red Ring Creek. And I'd like to know if that's navigable. And I believe it's a cold water stream also. I'd like to see if that's checked. I don't think anything was said to people who live to the south of that area. Everybody says everything but the south. I'd like to see people that live to the south to be on agenda and notify what's going on in this particular project. I don't think anybody was mentioned on it, even tonight's meeting, anything to the south. And I think it does pertain to some areas to the south of that project. And affected that shoreline thing, because I think that 30-foot building setback on that creek might be encroached, but I don't believe what engineer said, that it might not be anywhere near any architectural buildings, or it might not affect the site, but I just want to clarify that a little bit. The wetlands on that property, it was mentioned that most of the wetlands were on the south side of that property. I agree, but I believe there's some on the south also that protrudes out, because I've seen water standing in the fields, definitely on the south side of that, of the fields that were planted there. So I believe there's standing water also on the south side of that property of high water. And in the past, that property held an old building, a farmhouse. And I'm just curious if that well was abandoned, capped, or where that well is, or it's still there on that property. Let's see what else they have. You know, I'm gonna hang it up for a minute, and if I come back, I'll give you some more. How's that?
Sure, that's good. The navigability.
Not answering the questions
No?
now. Nope. They're for the public hearing. You can ask public hearing. I defer to the chairman. The acting chairman, you can answer. The purpose is to say at the public hearing. But, chairman.
Go ahead.
When you mentioned the south neighbors, did you need something more than the regular 300 feet notification? Because they all get notified when we get to that point.
Well, I guess when they talked about it tonight, nothing was mentioned to the south. What was zoned south of that particular?
Okay, so you want the zoning information?
Yeah,
Okay.
just so everybody be aware what's actually zoned to the south.
We do not recommend we give additional notice. We follow the requirements. But I certainly think the takeaway for the petitioner is that if he's reaching out to the neighbors, you expect to know whether he reached out to the neighbors to the south, whether he's contacted them, whether he's met with them, what, if any, information you can provide. That's how I interpreted the comment.
Right, and I accept that. I guess the reason why I say that, I live in that subdivision, and there is some land that was put in a kind of a green space for us subdivision to walk through. And I think those neighbors should know that what's could be a button that if this would go through the restrictions on the wetlands that you may give, what restrictions are you going to put in those wetlands that are going to be a button that property to the south? If there's going to be any restrictions on that wetlands in that area at all. The wetlands actually butts the Red Wing Hills neighborhood. I guess, is there going to be, you're thinking about maybe, giving them some opportunities, some other organizations to use that wetland area? And I was just kind of curious if you had any ideas on who you're going to give it to and what restrictions would be on that wetlands if you had that.
Who's next? Commissioner Stickler?
It's very commendable, John, that you did that traffic study on Greenfield. I'm kind of interested in that. We've had a lot more traffic in that area since Sticks opened up and more. And it would be great if there's a way to give us some kind of idea exactly what the traffic at the intersection is going to be, not necessarily just the road, but on 164 in Glendale.
Okay, thank you. Who else? Commissioner Miller?
Excuse me. I don't see that we got landscaping plans, John, in our packet.
I believe
I brought those in, Madam Clerk. The landscape plan.
You did bring them in today for the next
Oh, my
meeting.
apologies.
So we do not have those in our hands tonight, but they're brought in today. Okay, thank you. Who else?
Actually, in rebuttal to Commissioner White, I think it was stated that the land to the south is owned by the county, either parks or just the county in general, between your subdivision and Red Wing.
Yeah, Waukesha County does, but the backside of that neighborhood.
Is there a question about that needs to be clarified? I mean, we can
Yeah, I
leave
guess
that,
maybe,
think.
I guess, to get further on that, I guess there is a portion that I guess I'd like to, maybe it's not you, maybe I can dig into it a little bit, see exactly what kind of delineation between the county land and you are, I guess, and where we are, I guess. I mean, but I guess that'd be up to me to dig into that.
Well, I guess I don't think that's an unreasonable request of the petitioner to clarify exactly the ownership of adjacent lands. Is that
Yeah, that's what
basically
I'm
the
looking
question?
for. I guess that's what I'm looking for.
I think that's not unreasonable. If we could make that request of the petitioner, I'm not necessarily expecting you to do it at this point in time. I mean, if you've got a response,
Sure.
you can do it. Okay, well, fair enough.
Why did you go through all that detail when you were?
Okay, so it's a request for the petitioner to provide information or demonstrate the ownership of the adjacent lands. Is that fair enough for where we're at tonight? Okay. All right, what else? I've got a couple of quick things, I guess, requests for information. I had one on the list before you turned it over in terms of material samples, so thank you for providing some material samples. I think what I'm going to be looking for is information that addresses item 8 about the architecture with the ordinance requirement of the 50% of the exterior building face to be brick decorative masonry, glass ephes, and it says our other appropriate facades may be approved by the plan commission of the town board, not a, I guess I'll offer it as a suggestion, or perhaps you would want to bring, if you're intending to do something similar to the overlook development, maybe photographs or that type of thing to illustrate if it's going to be similar to that. I guess what I'm going to be looking for, I think it's going to be, I guess I'll say your burden to demonstrate and present information as to how you comply with that part of the code. The other thing that I guess I would ask for, I'm not sure about this. The town looked at a development on this property previously. A concern I have or information I'm looking for is grading. I understand you have concepts for stormwater management, but I think a previous proposal to my looking at it was bringing in a tremendous amount of fill. I guess I'd be interested to know whether a grading plan and whether cuts and fills on the site balance, whether there's imported material, what kind of material it is. And along with it, I'd be looking for, I know you mentioned the use of turned down slabs as opposed to frost walls or basements or crawl spaces or whatever. I'd be looking for information for you to demonstrate to the plan commission, the town board, that what you'd be proposing to do fully complies with the uniform dwelling code. I'd suggest you run it past the building inspector and that type of thing, so they could speak to the issue about the code compliance of that kind of construction. Who else has, again, Attorney Macy has guided us looking for information for presentation, consideration at future meetings and public hearings. What else? If not, if there's nothing more, we'll pause at that point in time. Thank you. And I'm assuming you want to resume your position and finish the rest of the meeting, Mr. Chairman? No? Go ahead and get it done? Okay, we can do that if that meets with the pleasure of the group. We are down to adjournment. I guess that's easy enough. Is that our last item? Don't need to come back to the chair for that. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn? Very good, Commissioner Flanagan, seconded by Commissioner Ramirez. I'm assuming this is a safe vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, we'll adjourn. We'll take a 5-minute break and we'll resume with the town board meeting at 20 minutes to 9.